Hello! Welcome back to another episode of Poetry East to West. Today we're going to dive deeper into what contemporary colloquial Chinese poetry is like by explaining the 4 principles used by lower body poetry progenitor Shen Haobo. And keep in mind, this is only one of the many poetry schools flourishing in China right now. Let's get into it. Write a poem for me. Many people probably have a headache from hearing this. Most of our knowledge of poetry comes from textbook, and I think you can agree with me on this no matter you're from the East or the West. While all the things we learned at school offered us a robust understanding of what poetry is like, it was also a one-sided, standard, and probably not the most interesting poetry you can find. Well, what is interesting then? In my opinion, contemporary poetry is interesting. First of all, you are not confined to the standards or the rhyming schemes, and second of all, it's spoken word. That means you are still exploring the same meaningful and deep concepts, but in a way or in a language that you and I can both understand. And contemporary Chinese poets are leading the way to write relevant, colloquial, and out-of-box poetry. Before diving into how to write a contemporary Chinese poem, let's take a look at this clip. Did you find this clip poem-worthy? I hope you did, because I did and I wrote a poem on it. In this poem, I described the colors and movements in that moment and let my mind naturally flow into another space to continue what was happening in reality. What do you think? Did you find any poetic elements from the video or from this poem? Hey, but objectively speaking, what made it poetic? Well, quoting from Shen Haobo, the progenitor of lower body poetry and one of the most influential poets nowadays, he talks about 4 principles that make up his poetry philosophy: going downwards, a bodily texture, instinct, and truth. Let's take a look at each of them. Well, going downwards, in my opinion, is more of a requirement rather than a principle. Going downwards means you are an ordinary individual living in this world, even when you are writing a poem. That means even if you've discovered some truism in your life or in your poetry, you shouldn't just tell it as you are a bystander or a judge. No matter where and when, you are an ordinary human being. Let's use an example. These are 2 versions of the same poem by me. And which version do you like better? Well, I like the second one because I feel like in this version, I am closer to the readers. I'm just simply describing what I saw and what I realized instead of forcing any ideas onto my readers. So that's the first principle of contemporary Chinese poetry. Contemporary Chinese poets write poetry for readers to explore different opinions, not to go through a didactic experience. Bodily texture is a principle that's very exclusive to Shen Haobo's poetry style, but I love it so much, so I try to incorporate in my poetry as much as I can. In short, to write a poem, the poets need to have experienced something themselves. As Shen Haobo writes, "My body is present where my poetry takes place. Wherever my body goes, that's where the poetry unfolds. Only when the body truly arrives can the senses and the heart arrive too." Okay, the next one, instant. Just as the word poetic, crispy and fast, poetic moments need to be captured in an instant too. I see this principle as an extension of imagery, which is frequently used in the Tang poetry back in ancient China, like these ones. When you read these lines, do you picture something that's lasting for days or just a quick poetic and beautiful meaningful moment? And I hope it's the latter. So what Shen Haobo is stressing here is that poetry is not a narration, nor is the intention to narrate a story. A moment is poetic enough, and it's more than enough to tell the full picture of an event. And last but not least, truth. Sometimes our purest emotions are covered or concealed by language, manners, or intentional acting. But no matter what event or object you describe, there is a layer of truth to it. As abstract as it may sound, it is the poet's job to peel through the layers of disguise and arrive at the truth. This could mean there is no flowery language because they add another cloth to the truth. There is no poet's biased, subjective emotions because they're to some extent also concealing the truth. And there is no conviction because taking clear sides can mean rejecting ambiguity and complexity. And that's exactly where truth can be at and can be like, vague and sophisticated. So with these 4 principles, do you see the world around you a little bit more poetic now? I hope that every second has become a poetic instant for you, and because you're present at where you are, there must be some poetics taking place around you. Just look around. So that wraps up another episode of Poetry East to West. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. And definitely leave a comment if you are interested in a specific poet or poetry style that you would like me to make another video. See you next time!